Good afternoon, Paul. Welcome.
Thank you. Give me just a second. I'm just getting this new laptop up and I need to get the agenda in front of me.
No problem at all. So far, we have Commissioner Freeman, but we're a few minutes early and still waiting on folks. So take your time.
Great. Okay. And Ken, do we have folks signed up for public comment today?
Not that I know of. Carol, did we get anybody last minute?
No, we don't have anybody for public comment today.
Okay, great. Morning, Rob, or actually afternoon, I should say.
Morning, Paul. How are you?
I am doing okay up in Portland today. So Carol or Ken, do we have confirmations from commissioners that they are planning on attending? You know if we'll have a quorum today?
Yeah, we should have quorum. Oh, sorry, Ken.
No, go ahead, Carol.
We should have quorum. Commissioner Beach won't be with us and neither will Commissioner Przansky, but everybody else said that they were able to attend today.
Okay, great.
And it looks like we have Carl has just entered. We see Rob, Commissioner Freeman is here, and yourself, and so we're close.
Okay, well, since the action items aren't a little farther in the agenda, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and get started. Are we live yet?
I think Carol just needs to flip that switch.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Are you ready?
I don't think we're quite there yet. Carol,
Oh, okay.
I didn't see the notice come through that we're recording.
It started quite a bit earlier, so I actually started at 5 minutes before we started, so it's ready to go whenever you're ready.
Perfect.
All right, let's go.
I can take, do you want me to take attendance now or do you? It doesn't, I don't.
Are we live now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, let me first introduce the meeting. Today is the January 20th meeting of the Criminal Justice Commission. My name is Paul Solomon. I am the chair. We've got a pretty full agenda today. Carol, if you want to go ahead and do roll call now, that would be great.
Yeah. So we'll start with Commissioner Auxier. Commissioner Beach. Vice Chair Bovet.
Present.
Commissioner Freeman.
I'm here.
Commissioner McPherson.
Present. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Commissioner Norton. Senator Przansky. And then Commissioner Lewis.
You didn't call me, but
And then Chair Solomon. Oh, there's Lewis.
present.
Now we don't have quorum until Auxier or Norton arrives.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and move forward with the non-action items, which include, it sounds like we don't have any public comment for today. But the agency update, is that you, Ken?
That is, and I see Commissioner Norton is just about to jump in with us as well.
Great.
So just a couple items. First, when she's able to get online, this will be our first meeting with Commissioner Norton. So welcome to our little group here. A few quick updates. The first I just wanted to let everybody know about is looking ahead to our January meeting. We are currently nearing the end of the protest period for our Justice Reinvestment grant decisions that we made at our previous meeting. We have received 2 protests so far. There are a few counties that have until Friday, and so we have not closed that period yet, but that will be something that, similar to this, to the specialty courts process, we will be sending out individual memos on each of those as we move towards that meeting. Also just wanted to provide a little bit of information on some things that we're looking forward to next year. The first, unsurprisingly, we're all gearing up for the 2024 legislative session. There are lots of public safety related items on the agenda, very unsurprisingly. CJC has been involved in some conversations with folks, legislators and others. We expect ourselves to pop up in a number of discussions, kind of like usual, whether for study bills or others. But certainly, like we've done in the past, we will be providing updates to you as commissioners as we move through that process. We will also be providing updates. One thing that Chair Solomon has asked me to do is to have the commission a little bit more involved as we go through our legislative concept and budget build for the 25-27 session. So of course that's happening too. That process, the governor's office just rolled out their timeline for that process starting next year. It's a little bit different in cadence than we've had in the past, but as we begin that development, we will be bringing those to you. We are also going to be working through 2024 on reviving the Justice Reinvestment Summit that we used to have pre-COVID. So the last time that we had a summit, hopefully a number of you attended, was in 2019, and then the world changed and we haven't had one since. And so we're currently targeting 2025. We've always done the summits in the past on odd years to correspond with legislative sessions. So we're again looking at February of that year. We're going to be working as staff over the Christmas break to start thinking about themes, possible speakers, what have you. Certainly, if any commissioners have ideas for things they would like us to cover at the summit or ideas for speakers, please don't hesitate to forward those on to me or just give me a quick call and we can talk through those. Right now, we're pretty much a blank slate. And so get in early and we might be able to fit that into the agenda. The last thing that I'll mention is that we're currently in our very busy year-end reporting period. We have a lot of different reports that are required both right around the first of the year or right after the first of the year. So just as a heads up, if you're interested in some of our programs, we will be having reports due on January 1st for both our illegal marijuana market enforcement grant, but then also our impacts grant, which looks at the intersection of behavioral health and the criminal justice system. A little bit later, on the 15th of January, we will be releasing a report that we're required to file according to SB 1510 from the last short session. That has a couple different components to it that will cover both our grant making, how our grants are dispersed across counties, the population served, and other details about the grant, Justice Reinvestment Grant itself. But then also it contains some requirements that we look into sanctioning practices within parole and probation. And we've been working on a fancy dashboard to communicate those. And so that will be mid next month. And then finally, we have our House Bill 3078 report, which we've filed annually since 2017, which was when 3078 was passed. That looks at our downward departure grant within justice reinvestment, both the efficacy and what programs are involved. So all of those are coming your way. If you would like to see them individually, just let me know. We can send them to you. Otherwise, they'll be available on our publication section of the website. And that's all that I have for the agency update today. I'll turn it back to you, Chair. Oh, you're muted.
If I had a dime for every time I've done that, I'd be a rich man. Any questions for Director Sanchagrin? Great. Well, I noticed we have Commissioner Auxier with us, and as you indicated, Ken, we have Commissioner Norton, and I just want to provide a warm welcome to Commissioner Norton, who was appointed at the same time as Commissioner McPherson was, and this is her first official meeting. So welcome. I know that you are very steeped in JRI, having served for some time on the Grant Review Committee, but just wanted to welcome you and give you the floor for a moment if you'd like to share anything about yourself.
Sure, thank you. And apologies, I was actually, yes, I think I was in New Zealand at your last meeting. So as much as I would have liked to be there, New Zealand was way more exciting and way more fun. No offense. Sure. My name's Lisa Norton. I'm a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz. Hi, Rob. And have worked in the field of domestic and sexual violence for several years, many years. And also currently work at the tribe, which I have over 20 years experience working at the tribe, living on the reservation. I am, and at my most current capacity, Chief Administrative Officer, which just means that I run all special projects, new projects, things that don't quite fit somewhere. I'm the law enforcement contact. I do a bunch of things that nobody else doesn't fit neatly in other categories. Outside of that, I have served on the Criminal Justice Commission, I want to say since like 18 or 19. And then it could have been not that long ago. Do some work with OAA around transformative, sorry, it's after lunch. So transformative justice work and that kind of thing. So, and more I'm getting called to the field. And so there must be a reason I'm being called and being asked to serve. So I look forward to it and appreciate getting up to speed fully and being a more contributing member of the commission in the next year. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. Your voice is one that we look forward to hearing more of in coming meetings. All right. I believe next item on the agenda is the IMM EGP amendment. And Rima, are you presenting on that?
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Solomon, Commission members. My name is Rima Atun. I am the grant coordinator for the Illegal Marijuana Market Enforcement Grant. I'm very happy to be in front of you today, and I'm going to go ahead and share a brief presentation with you about this amendment request we have from one of our grantees. So I'm going to share my screen and hope that nothing goes wrong. Bear with me for just a second. All right. Can everyone see the presentation all right?
Yep, it looks great.
All right, excellent. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of background on this amendment request. In 2022, through HB 4074, our marijuana grant, as I like to refer to it because the name is rather a large mouthful, our grantee pool was expanded to include community-based organizations, and there was $6 million set aside. JBARJ Youth Services was one of the 2 CBOs that were awarded, and they were awarded $390,000 to provide on-site crisis services such as interpretation, crisis support, shelter, basic necessities such as clothing, food, and then longer term support services to victims of human trafficking that were encountered during law enforcement investigations on site. And that's primarily when law enforcement goes in and serves a search warrant and clears out the illegal grow site. Then a lot of times they'll run into workers in those crisis conditions, they're being coerced into labor. So that was the program model that JBARJ originally was awarded for. In 2022, this program model made a lot of sense that really aligned with what law enforcement was seeing at the time. There were a few notable occurrences where they ran into 30 or more workers that were being held in, inhumane conditions and needed crisis support on site. In 2023, that's not really what we've been seeing. So if we look at some of our data from other grantees, in 2022, there were 39 incidents reported with 220 observers that were seen in those, potentially trafficking conditions. From January to September of this year, there have only been 8 incidents where folks observed folks who might be in those conditions. And our other CBO grantee also reports that the majority of their clientele is actually getting engaged through outreach this year. So with that in mind, JBAR-J submitted a request to expand their scope of services, which is why it's in front of you today, since it is a shift in the services that they were awarded for. They would like to reallocate $100,000 in their personnel funds to focus on outreach, and then move $9,000 in their community awareness program, or to actually start a community awareness program that would consist of radio ads, billboards, being present at, the Latino Festival and other public events, which our other CBO grantee has had good engagement with the community and good results in engaging clients through those means. So I do want to note that this does not change the overall approved amount in any of those budget categories. Rather, it is a shift in the services and the way that their program is organized. Our recommendation from staff is to approve this amendment. They wouldn't not do the other, excuse me, they would still go on site with their law enforcement partners if they do encounter folks on site that need services immediately. That piece of the program would remain intact. They're literally just expanding their services to be able to engage clients in other ways.
And I see Commissioner Freeman has a question, but first I've got one quick question. What region or county or counties does JBAR-J serve?
This is Central Oregon. Their main partnership has been with Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, and they've done some work with the neighboring counties as well.
Great. Commissioner Freeman?
So thank you. I was going to ask the very same question because I know they're not doing work here in Douglas County. I will also note, for those that have not been out on these marijuana grows, these pictures you have of way people are living are so much nicer than what we encounter. This looks much like campgrounds and very good living. I have pictures in my phone of grows I've been on that are incredibly disgusting and horrible. I'm questioning the need to do outreach in this county when you may need to actually do the services in counties that don't have this service. That would be my only question of why we feel like doing outreach in a county that already has, some service available is a better way to use the dollars than to repurpose them in counties that don't have this kind of work going on.
So they are embedded in Central Oregon. That's their service area for this program. And the human trafficking services are relatively new in comparison to the other services they provide through the program. As I mentioned before, our other CBO grantee works more in Southern Oregon and also in Portland and other areas of the state. And the majority of clients that they have gotten that have come to them for services, they have made those initial contacts with through outreach. So there is need in that area, and this has been a way that we've seen to work.
And so to be clear, this isn't new funding. This is an award that was already made to them that they're just asking to reallocate some of the money in different categories.
Correct. And they're not even asking to reallocate to different categories. They're asking that their personnel can perform these additional activities while maintaining the same activities that they were already awarded for.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
So, Mr. Chair, again, this is broadening scope from the original grant to include these other things, which it sounds like maybe some of the other organizations might be doing successfully, but it is an expansion of scope. And I guess I'm okay with this. I just would caution us to realize every time we expand scope, there'll be future needs and, want to continue to provide those services at that expanded scope area.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you, Commissioner Freeman. Yes. Any other comments? All right. Thank you for the presentation. Unless there's any other discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the amendment request.
Well, also move just to get the conversation going.
Great. Is there a second?
I will second.
Great. Motion made by Commissioner Norton, seconded by Commissioner McPherson. Did you say Carol's doing the roll call today?
Yep, I've got roll ready for you.
Great.
Commissioner Auxier,
Yes.
Commissioner Beach is gone. Vice Chair Bovet,
Yes, I'd like to make a quick comment after we're done.
okay. Commissioner Freeman,
We'll also vote yes, and maybe since we're not having discussion, I can make a comment afterwards also.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
So
All
it
right.
passes.
Thank you. Great. Comments from Vice Chair Bovet and Commissioner Freeman?
I'll give it a go. I just wanted to note for the record that I share Commissioner Freeman's nervousness about expanding the scope. In this case, what we crafted up in House Bill 4074 basically limits it to, quote, responding to humanitarian crises associated with unlawful marijuana cultivation and distribution operations. I think doing outreach to see if there are additional folks that are victims of labor trafficking we're talking about would probably fit within the parameters of what I just read, but I could easily see this slipping down a slippery slope that goes outside the scope of what the legislature has authorized these funds to be spent for. So I'd want us to keep an eye out on it. I totally get the change, and I don't know if this is what Commissioner Freeman was going to speak to, but we have seen a pretty dramatic change just in 1 year in terms of how the drug trafficking organizations are conducting these mass cannabis production operations throughout Oregon. Instead of having a smaller number of very, very large grows with hundreds of folks that are victims of labor trafficking, we're seeing now hundreds of much smaller grows with smaller numbers of folks. That originally we saw start about a year and a half ago in Douglas County and Jackson and Josephine, but we're seeing that everywhere else. So I'm not surprised to see J-Bar Jake come to us and say, hey, we're just not taking down the big, huge grows with 200 people we have to respond to. Now it's more, we're taking down, 10 or 20 and there's 5 or 6 people there. And so it's a little more challenging, not only for law enforcement, but I have no doubt that it's more challenging for victim services providers like J-Bar J as well. And I'm blanking on the other grantee, which covers the rest of the state. So anyways, that's just what I wanted to put on the record. I share Commissioner Freeman's concerns, but I totally get why J-Bar J has approached us with this proposal.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Freeman?
I was just going to mention, I serve on the board of directors of our Douglas Interagency Narcotics team. So at least once a year and sometimes multiple times a year, I go out with the teams on these eradication projects. And Commissioner Movet is right in that they have changed tactics, but the way that people live and the way people are treated has certainly not changed. It's horrible. And it's easy to think of all these people as criminals because what they're doing is criminal acts. I mean, they're illegally growing marijuana, and they're also illegally dumping chemicals into our creeks and really destroying the land and the environment while doing it. But oftentimes they are forced to do it. They're not there because they want to be. It's because of the situation they find themselves in working with the cartels. I was going to mention, if we were to have a chart up of the number of plants seized or the amount of illegal grows occurring in counties around Oregon, my guess is the number one county would be Jackson, followed by Josephine, and Douglas would be third. And way down the line would be Deschutes and some of the other counties. There's a line that the marijuana growers call the wet line that goes really right across Douglas County, right in the middle of Douglas County. Things north of the wet line make it difficult to grow outdoors, and south makes it very productive. So when you think about illegal marijuana grows, at least outdoor grows, think about that wet line and the counties that lie south of or north of that line. So again, thank you for the time.
Yep. Thank you for your comments. All right. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. We're going to hear from Ms. Budbill about the IMM EGP rules.
Good afternoon, Chair Solomon, members of the commission. I am just getting the PowerPoint loaded real quick. Would you let me know when you can see it?
It's up now.
See it.
Right. Perfect. Thank you all. My name is Bridget Budbill. I am a staff person here at the CJC, and following up on REMA's amendment request, I will be telling you a little bit about permanent rulemaking that we started as a process. We started as temporary rulemaking after the changes from House Bill 4074 that Commissioner Bovet previewed. So I won't go over this stuff too much, but I did really quick for the new members. I think we covered this enough with REMA, but there were these legislative changes, and essentially they prompted us to open up a grant that was designed for law enforcement response to be available to non-law enforcement to support victims of human trafficking and labor trafficking. So if you'd like and you have questions, we can go over this in more detail. But what you're here to do today or consider doing today is we started a temporary rulemaking process back in 2022 to change the grant so that we could get $20 million in one-time funding out the door efficiently. Those rules have expired, so now we need to make rules for the program permanent that still allow the program to be available to community-based organizations. So there's two things you could do today. One, if you want to promulgate the temporary rules that have been in effect since April of 2022, you can authorize staff to do that and they would become permanent. Permanent meaning they are permanent until you want to change them. They're not like forever. Or if not, if there's things you want to tinker with, that is up to you. And I just did want to point out that can have an effect on solicitations in the future, depending on how in-depth you want revisions to be. If it's relatively minor, it probably shouldn't slow anything. If you wanted to start over again, that would be a bigger lift, of course. So just to say, that's what we're here to think about. So the things that you would be potentially making permanent include a definition of community-based organization. And that is because prior to the changes in 4074, this was eligible to units of local government. And of course, we need the services to be able to go through CBOs to do the work. So this is the definition in bold at the bottom of the page that exists in our policy now. This is how the grant has been operating under this definition of CBO. So I think, Chair Solomon, it kind of depends on how you'd like to do this. If you'd like commission comments or questions to go at the end of discussion of all of the potential permanent rules, or if we'd like to go kind of change by change, what would you prefer?
Well, Let's go change by change because I know we're going to have some comments on the definition of community-based organization. Not sure about the other ones, but let's start with this one. And I see that Vice Chair Bovet has his hand up at the ready.
Indeed, and thank you, Chair Solomon, for the time to kind of explain where I'm at on this. I actually don't have any problem with any of the other proposed rules making the temporary rules permanent, but this definition you see here on the screen of community-based organization is something that, after Ken reminded me earlier, it's something that I came up with on the fly. Literally to try to resolve some differences and disputes among commission members when we were trying to figure out how to grant out the original $6 million that's already been referred to. That small portion went to JBAR-J, and then the larger portion went to a consortium. My struggle with this is I don't really know what this definition means, even though I wrote it, because I think it's terrible. It was done as a compromise. I think we need to actually make it meaningful because you don't really register under IRC 501c. You get a letter saying you're qualified as a tax exempt organization. And then fiscal sponsor has a real peculiar and particularized meaning in the 501c3 world when C3 loans their C3 status to another associated nonprofit to do various work. So we were trying to capture that in this quickly written definition. I'm not terribly worried about it because there are only 2 grantees. There probably are only going to be 2 grantees for quite some time, and I think they both qualify under any definition, I'm guessing. But I just hate this definition because it's terrible and doesn't really work, and I don't think it means anything. So I actually sent a redraft to Ken and to Bridget that I'd kind of like folks to consider, which I think is more technically accurate in terms of how the Internal Revenue Code, particularly 501c, works. But I don't want to exclude anybody, but I want it to actually be a meaningful definition. Anyway, so that's my take on it. I'm happy to go either way that folks want to push, but like I say, I have to own up to this particular definition being done on the fly to resolve conflicts, and I just think we resolved it with very poor wording. It hasn't nobody's been harmed by it, but I just think it needs to be cleaned up. So thank you for the time.
Yes. So maybe if we could hear from Ken and Bridget, you probably have the definition that Vice Chair Bovet sent. I'm curious what staff's take on revising the definitions are. And then we can have a discussion about it.
Bridget, I'll defer to you initially, but also what I could do real quick while Bridget is offering her thoughts is I'll take Vice Chair Bovet's words. We can put them in a PowerPoint therefore we could display it up. Great. Or Bridget, if you want, we can just make sure everybody can actually see what it is.
Yeah, or even if we can just share screen where someone has the email, sure. It would be fine. You're muted, Bridget.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. I do not doubt Commissioner Bovet's ability to write a good definition of community-based organization, so I don't have anything to argue with. I'm happy to present the language as it was sent in the email this morning to you all if you'd like to actually see it right now.
That would be great. Okay, yeah, let's pull that up.
Let me do that.
Okay, and Bridget, I've got it ready to go too. Okay. So if it's hard on your end, just let me know and I'll share screen.
Ken, I think you should go for it.
Right, I will do that. I think that you need to stop sharing first and then I can share mine. Here we go. And I'll probably have to zoom in. So please, if folks could let me know how this looks.
Yeah, if you could zoom in a little bit. And okay. Maybe, Rob, if you want to walk us through what you wrote.
Wait, trying to see if the best way to zoom in.
You're muted, Rob.
Yeah, you're probably going to have to zoom in. So basically, I just said, here's what we drafted before. So that's the number 4. toward the top left of your screen. And then if I were to write it, in my opinion, technically correct, it would be just right before it says best, Rob, the new italicized. So I don't know if you can zoom in on that. I can actually read it.
If you'll give me just a second, I'll get a better zoomed in version.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment and get
Sure.
something a little bit better. The email interface is a little bit less friendly than just having something in Word.
And I guess if I could explain, Chair Solomon, I think it's important that we get a really good, solid definition of CBO somewhere in the CJC rules that actually that works and is meaningful. Because I have a feeling we're going to have more CBOs involved in more of our grant programs, which is great. But I think we ought to actually state it correctly so we can essentially cut and paste it into various other programs when we get there. So that's why, even though if you want to skip it over this time, you don't even want to hassle with us, I totally get it. But to me, I read that definition and I just went, oh my God, I can't believe I actually had anything to do with writing that.
I'm fine with us taking this up now. I mean,
Okay.
I think for consistency's sake in the future, it'd be good if we have a good definition.
Yeah, that's kind of what made sense to me. And if I could explain, we're trying to cover two different approaches in nonprofits. And so I tried to retain the A and B, just essentially spell it out. And it's a lot more words, but see if I can explain. So CBO would be a nonprofit organization actively registered to do business in the state of Oregon, based in the community. So retain that language, independent from any unit of local government, retain that language, and has and discloses to the state in one or two ways. So they can either be outright a 501c, and it doesn't necessarily mean a 3. It could be a 4, a 6, an 8, a 7. I've formed all of those various things. C3s, of course, which are commonly known as charities. So there's additional tax benefits to those that donate to a C3 as compared to the other ones. So you could just be a straight 501c, whatever, with an acknowledgement letter from the IRS, or you can just be your nonprofit organization who then associates with another nonprofit 501c3, so you can borrow their tax exempt status. That's what we call fiscal sponsorship. So 501c3s can actually loan out their superior tax exempt status to another nonprofit organization if they're all part of the same mission. And that's what's the fiscal sponsorship is about. And so I think those two kind of cover the same things, except my goal here was to more correctly craft it, because I don't know what a nonprofit registered under Section 501c is. That doesn't really exist. And then this other, on B, it just says nonprofit fiscal sponsor registered under that. I don't know what that means either. So anyways, that's my proposal. I think we ought to bake CBO, a solid, good definition of it somewhere in our OARs, and I'd propose to do it here. But if folks want to stew on this longer, want to do it as part of a different program, I'm fine with that too. I just don't think the current definition works or has any meaning that's enforceable. And I'll stop talking now.
Great, thanks. We'll open it up for discussion. Do folks have any comments or thoughts about the definition as proposed by Vice Chair Bovet?
I need to apologize. I'm on my phone, so finding the little raise hand button is just not going to work for me. So apologies for jumping on if I talk over somebody. I'm not prepared to make this decision because I agree with Rob, that Commissioner Bovet, that we need to be thinking about where else the definition is used, and could we pick something up, for example, from the DOJ or from Oregon State that is more legally sound, that we would be able to go ahead and adopt as our own, that would clear up any confusion. That's my 2 cents.
Great. Any other comments? All right. How, Commissioner Bovet, how would you feel about us bringing this back up after getting a little more input and thinking about how we apply this, a new definition to any grant program where CBOs may be beneficiaries.
That sounds great to me. Like I said, I don't think we're going to have clamoring from any other competitors for the 2 grants under this particular program. But I agree with you, Chair Solomon. I think at some point we just need a good solid definition. And if DOJ's got something better than what I crafted up, I'm all for that too. I'm embarrassed by what we plugged in there to get us by, but I understand why we had to do that because we were moving very fast.
Great. All right, Bridget, do you want to bring us back to kind of where we were in your presentation?
Sure thing. Let's see. I guess I should ask Chair Solomon, would you prefer to do the rest of the rule discussion today, or do you want to do a package deal with the CBO discussion at a later meeting? Because I wonder if you want to bifurcate, do a little now, a little later, or do it all at once.
Well, talk to us about the timing and any implications of not doing this today.
There really aren't. There's nothing severe. It's just a good thing to get done because at some point in the next, next quarter or 2, we'll probably want to open up the marijuana grant solicitation again. So we want to be prepared with permanent rules. So if the staff were to get together with the definition that was proposed today and bring it back to you in January, once you've all had a little more time to think about it, you could kick off your rule promulgation January, like 22nd, and it would just push back your sort of 49-day minimum public comment period by about a month. I don't know that that's going to be particularly dispositive for applicants in the future. We would just have to respond accordingly. If you come back in January and you say you want to rewrite all of the rules, that would be more significant, of course. So
I don't think that's what we're considering. I mean, we haven't gone through this yet, but I haven't heard from any other commissioners concerns about the other rules. I am fine with punting this to the next meeting if you think that gives you sufficient time to evaluate and do a little more research.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. The other 2 things that we're going to just be covered today was a definition of humanitarian crisis that was adopted around the same time for the purposes of these rules. And that was vetted with DOJ and other kind of groups that would know how to sort of craft a word or a definition like that. And just a couple other very small things that opened up eligibility. The 2 big things were really the definition of CBO and the definition of humanitarian crisis.
Great. All right. Next up on the agenda then is the sentencing rules.
And Chair Solomon, that is also me. So I'm getting that PowerPoint loaded. And I will, let me know when you can see it. It's a little bit bigger.
Yep. So.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this is a larger presentation than the last one. And I will say that this is pretty complicated. So if you all want to stop me at any point and hash something out, just please do. So what we're here to do today is you are the State Sentencing Commission. So great. The way Oregon does sentencing is since about November 1st of 1989, we have a sentencing grid, guidelines grid that sets presumptive sentences. And the way that Oregon modifies that grid is a little bit unique. Other states tend to do it differently, but what we do is you as our Sentencing Commission, after any legislative session that modified or created new crimes, you take a look at those revisions or modifications or creation of new crimes, and you can decide whether you want to rank them on a crime seriousness scale, which we'll get to in a second, and or give them a person crime designation. So that's what you're here to do today, post 2023 legislative session. And I am I know the grid a little bit, but I am certainly not an expert. And so I hope the presentation, it is for everyone to understand, it is not built for experts, because you are the experts. And I say that just to we're going to go over what the grids do, or sort of the components of the grid. And this is not because I assume you don't know, it's because who knows what the sort of collective folks watching all of us might know together. So this is our grid. It's colorful, it's nice. There are parts to it that we need to understand. The A through I is the individual's criminal history, A being more serious. The 1 through 11 is the crime seriousness ranking, and that's most of what you're doing today is where should a new offense or a modified offense fall on this, if anywhere, with 11 being, of course, the most serious rank. Yellow boxes, presumptive prison, the other boxes, local control. So what is your role in this? I talked about this a little bit, but you're here to review all legislation, and you do have a lot of discretion here because your statute says that you shall adopt by rule any necessary modifications, and you are all the determiners of what is necessary. And so one of the things that I think might be helpful as sort of a guiding principle is our statute also tells us that you may classify offenses as person felonies or misdemeanors, and sort of the rule that we'll get to in a second is essentially you're looking to rate things or rank things of equal seriousness. So to be consistent, in other words. Once you decide today whether you'd like to add a rank or change a rank or add a person designation, we will promulgate that like we do other rules. The sort of wild card is that then we send them to the legislature. Not immediately, we might do that before the next long session, but then they decide whether they approve of your rules. That is not typical of rulemaking for agencies, but it is how we do it here in this circumstance. If they either don't get to your rules bill for whatever reason, or they disagree and they don't pass it, the rules that you promulgated about the grid would expire the following January. I don't think we've seen that happen since I've been here. Probably hasn't happened, if ever, in a very long time. So I don't think that's like a thing that tends to happen, but it's possible. So if anyone has any questions about sort of your role or your powers, please stop me at any point. So the crime seriousness ranking are also set out in our rules, and this is where you get your sort of be consistent instruction. Crime categories should represent crimes of relatively equal seriousness. Another thing is that you are not required to rank crimes. So if there's something that is prosecuted really infrequently, or if the ways in which you can be found guilty of doing something vary wildly, and it would be very hard to sort of group all of those ways under one rank. You're not required to rank things, so that's just kind of a disclaimer at the front end. Another thing that I think is unique about Oregon is we have an exclusive list of person crimes. So anything in that, at the sort of second piece of this slide, person crime designation, in that rule, that is our exclusive list of person felonies, followed by our exclusive list of person misdemeanors. If it's not in there, it's not considered a person crime in Oregon. So that's the other piece of what you're deciding to do. Should it be on that list? So what is the timeline for today? Really what you're doing today is kind of getting this rules discussion started. You'll make decisions about crime seriousness or person crime designation. We start rulemaking if you approve that. You may not finish today. It may be you need another meeting or two, but that is the thing we're starting today. And then of course we're following this up in February. The legislature may enact new crimes or modify others. We would then bring those back to you again. And all of this would be packaged up over the next year in a rules bill for the next long session in 2025. So to get into the actual 2023 session criminal law changes, I hope this is helpful. To be very clear, this is not necessarily a staff recommendation of where things should fall. If you have a difference of opinion or just read it differently, that's great. That's what you're here to do. But in terms of just trying to kind of block out the attention given to each grouping, that first 4 bullets in the sort of green block those are the ones that we see as less likely to need grid modifications based on what was changed and the effect of the changes. The sort of middle piece in the gray is literally a little bit more of a gray area. I think you could see it different ways. And then in the blue, those are the ones that are more likely or almost certainly need some sort of grid modification, a ranking, a designation, or in one case, adding an aggravating factor to our list of aggravating factors in rule. And again, please stop me at any point. I did also want to say, because there's just a lot of information in a meeting that is, not that long, I did hide some slides for the green box, but I can unhide them and walk through each one of them if you like. So just let me know what you'd prefer to do. So the ones that are these sort of green, less likely to be, less likely to need ranking or person crime designation are these 4 bills and what they did. So the evidence of physical injury, that is the thing that was modified was it added particular evidence to be used to substantiate the harms for evidence of physical injury. It didn't create new criminal conduct. It didn't modify existing conduct. So that is just the way you prove something. So we don't see there any reason there to add it's not a person crime. There's no conduct against a person, and there's no way to really rank it. Unless others see that differently, please let me know. The next one, any intoxicating substance, was added to our existing driving under the influence of intoxicants statutes, and it included, it essentially adds a substance to that category that is already ranked. And so we didn't see any necessity in changing anything there. But again, I have sort of specific slides for each one of these bills if you'd like to go a little bit more detailed. The other thing we could do is we could move to the ones that are more certainly, needing your attention and revisit these at the end if you'd prefer to do it that way. So
yeah, I think that would be my preference, okay. Bridget.
That occurred to me while I was saying this.
Yeah, that we may have limited time, that we start with the ones that may be more likely to require our attention.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? I think in the interest of time, I will skip forward to the ones that I think we staff sort of collectively think are more likely to need your attention than not. So let's get through these today. So the first is body armor as an aggravating factor. So what this does is in our CJC rules, the Sentencing Commission rules, there are a list of aggravating factors. And what this bill, Senate Bill 618, did was add, let me go to that slide. It adds as an aggravating factor whether a person was wearing body armor while committing a crime to the list of potential aggravating factors that a court can consider when deciding to depart from a presumptive sentence. So what you do here, if you approve this, is there is a list and rule, and that rule OAR 213 0080002. You would add this to the departure factors, and it would essentially just be adding the text. The person was wearing body armor in the course of and in furtherance of the crime or to facilitate the immediate flight therefrom, which is the statutory language the legislature added. Does anyone have any questions about doing that? All right, not seeing any. So next is Senate Bill 810. This is essentially use of a drone causing death or serious physical injury. This was an interesting one. We have existing drone laws. One is reckless interference with an aircraft, and the other is crimes involving unmanned aircraft being sort of official term for drone. What this bill does is it takes some of the conduct out of the crimes involving drones and moves it into reckless interference with an aircraft. So the question here is whether the revision, which is just moving some conduct into this existing, both are existing statutes, but moving the conduct into another statute, is it elevates, the effect is it elevates the conduct from an A misdemeanor to an A felony. And if it causes death or serious physical injury. So the question for you is, should this constitute a person crime, and where should it be ranked? And if you see in this column that says considerations, the existing crime of operation of weaponized unmanned aircraft is a person felony, and it's an 8 if there is serious physical injury. Otherwise, it's a crime category 6. So that's kind of intended to be your comparable offense. And I realize this is a lot of information, and you may need to just sit and think for a second. If there's other information I can bring up for you, please let me know.
Thoughts, commissioners? Questions? So if I understand you correctly, Bridget, you're asking us to make a determination here, right? Would you restate exactly what that is? It's whether to move it from misdemeanor to person.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. Sorry, I'm sure
factor?
I didn't
Yeah.
land the unmanned aircraft on the explanation all that well. So essentially what you're doing, so the change here was it took some conduct out of an existing crimes involving a drone and put it into reckless interference with an aircraft. So what the legislature was trying to make more to clarify was it is reckless interference with an aircraft if you are intentionally, interrupting a plane with your drone in a number of different ways. And they also added conduct. So it is now a felony if while you're doing that, while you're messing with a plane with your drone, if it causes death or serious physical injury. So now that we have this sort of elevated way of criminal conduct for interfering with an aircraft, this sentencing commission is going to be asked, do you want to consider that a person crime, and where should it fall, if anywhere, on the crime seriousness grid? Again, you aren't required to actually do either of those things, but that is an opportunity you have to do today. And I see Commissioner Bavette has his hand up.
So a real quick question, then I have a comment and possible motion to kind of demonstrate. It's been a while since we've done these, but as I recall, it's more of a two-step process. We give an initial indication of where we think things ought to land in terms of whether it's a person crime, not person crime, and where it should be ranked on the grid. And then we have to publish a notice of rulemaking. We have to go through that whole ritual. We have to take public comments and all that stuff. So today we're actually not voting on where to put it on the grid. I think what we're doing is giving an indication to staff about what they should publish for potentially putting it on. Is that correct, Bridget?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Bavette. That's exactly right. So what would be published is draft rule, or not draft rules. They would be rules, but then they would be subject to legislative notice, public comment, and publishing in the Secretary of State's bulletin. So you would have time to come back and revise based on input if you learned something new from that process.
And that's as I recall it. As I also recall it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't really make formal motions and seconds at this point. That would come later after all the rulemaking is done. Instead, we sought a consensus. So I would urge, right now, I would basically be I would make a motion to essentially designate this new offense as a person crime with a CC8 is what I would be moving to do, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say I'm seeking to see if we have a consensus that we should treat it very similar to 837-3652, which makes perfect sense to me. Have it designated as a person crime because that's what this crime is all about. And then CC8 seems to be the appropriate space. And if folks are agreeable to that, I think you can take your consensus and move to the next one. I think that's how we operated in the past.
Well stated. So comments from other commissioners?
I think Rob's got that right. So if you're looking for a consensus, I agree.
Is there anybody who has a different opinion? All right, not hearing any, I would take that as consensus to move this forward in the publication process.
Great, thank you very much. So the next bill likely requiring your attention is domestic terrorism. So the state legislature created the crime of domestic terrorism in two levels. One is a Class B felony, and the other is a Class C felony. And the legislature in this instance gave you the rank, which is sometimes a thing that they do. So the first degree crime of domestic terrorism, the legislature gave you the rank of crime category 9, and in the second degree, crime category 7. So your question here is, to my mind, should this receive a person crime designation, because it's already got the crime category rank. And I have a slide of comparable offenses hidden if you would like to discuss, kind of where this fits in with other, we don't have, this is our first sort of direct terrorism statute, but we also have things like treason and all kinds of things about making explosive devices that you could compare this to, if that would be helpful. If it seems like an obvious person crime to you, please, just reach consensus that way as well.
So this one, I maybe need to understand the statute better, because I think context would matter and whether human life was impacted as a result of this activity. That to me would lend itself more to a person crime than, some other situation where it didn't impact an individual.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Solomon. So I think that's the hard question, because you can, so the statutory language is, if a person intentionally destroys or substantially damages critical infrastructure, or intentionally introduces, releases, or disperses toxic substances in widespread contact with humans. That is your B felony. And so maybe it would be helpful to look at the comparable offenses. And when I say comparable, it doesn't mean that they're one-to-one. It just means that they're sort of on the scale of where this might fit in. I do think that sort of discussion of domestic terrorism, you can't terrorize the piling of a bridge, even if no one's on it. I think that is part of sort of understanding the nature of what the legislature was trying to make criminal. But I did add this just because I think this is hard to go through without a little more context. So we have treason, which is where that's one of our two original state crimes, murder and treason in our Constitution. The person commits treason when they levy war against the state of Oregon and essentially support the enemy, so their enemies. Then there's also 3 different types of bomb-related statutes. Possession of a destructive device is kind of what it sounds like. There's no mental state given. It was enacted in 1989 at the same time of the sentencing grid. And interestingly, it's not currently ranked as a person crime. Possession of a hoax destructive device is, though, both a felony and misdemeanor person crime. And I don't have an explanation as to why those two differ. It may just be that one was from 1989, the other was 1997. And the thinking about how to do that was a little different. I'm not sure. But I think for your sort of comparisons, treason is not listed as a person crime either, because I think there's a lot of ways to do that. So what questions do you have? Because I think that discussing what it is about domestic terrorism that makes it a person crime or not is exactly what you're here to do. And I can go back to the first slide that gives you the statutory language again, if that would be helpful.
That would. Thank you.
I should add, another thing you could do is some statutes have some, one type of conduct will be in one part and another more serious type of conduct will be in a later part, and you can rank that differently. So if you wanted to, you could rank the B felony, you could designate one as a person felony and one is not, if that seemed appropriate. It's not, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing, I should say.
And I should raise my hand, Chair.
Yep.
I hear what you're saying, Bridget, there, and I like that, but it in my mind it doesn't work because the fact patterns might not fit. I have a real hard time coming up with a fact pattern under the B felony that wouldn't be a person crime in my mind, because those are completed acts and these are designed to terrorize human beings, not physical objects. But really what the C felony is about is either conspiracy or substantial efforts to go there, but in many cases not getting there. So nobody's been terrorized. There may be an intent to future terrorize people. So that's why I'm really struggling. But I seem to recall that we have in our rules for some offenses similar to this, or where we carve it up in rule and we say it's a person crime if, but it's not a person crime otherwise. And maybe there's a way to look at some of those where in the C felony, where has someone been injured or placed at risk of being injured, that's where I want to see. Whereas I'm not as worried about the first one because I think they're all going to be person crimes on the first one.
I guess one question I have about the first one is how we define critical infrastructure. What does that mean?
Chair Solomon, Commissioner Bovet, I don't have a definition for critical infrastructure. Commissioner Bovet, I think burglary, the first degree burglary does something like that, where if the dwelling is occupied, it's a person crime. If it's unoccupied, it's not. So that might be a good corollary.
So someone just posted the definition of critical infrastructure means a gas, electric, or water utility system or electric substation, a pipeline, or other conveyance for carrying gas, natural gas, or fuel, a fiber optic cable network, a base transceiver station, or other wireless communication infrastructure, a data center, or a dam, bridge, road, airport, marina, or rail line. That's helpful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I didn't, that is from the bill and I didn't post that.
Okay.
Thank you, Ash.
Commissioner McPherson.
Thank you. Based on the other slides that showed comparables and how they treated similar situations, I don't see Class C as a person crime at all. There's no indication that it actually would have to cause harm to someone. It's possession with intent, which is similar to the second charge that was on the other slide, Bridget, about possession. I think it's directly comparable to the Class C. Based on the definition of, yes, the possession of a destructive device. That's very similar to the Class C here, and that is not a person crime. So for consistency's sake, I think the Class C should not be a person crime. I think it's more complicated on the Class B portion of the statute for a couple reasons. One, the definition that was put in the chat, and then secondarily, Bridget, if you could go back to the slide. intentionally destroying or substantially damaging critical infrastructure as defined in the chat, to me, is not a person crime. It is a public disorder crime, but there's no indication that an individual would suffer, obviously, physical harm. There's no indicate like a cell phone tower. I mean, it's not harming a person. That's more an infrastructure and public disorder situation. What causes me confusion is the second part of the Class B felony. Intentionally introduces, release, or disperses toxic substance into widespread contact with humans. I think that is a person crime. But I don't believe the first clause is, and I'm not certain if you can differentiate within the Class B that it has to be the second portion or the second clause of that crime that's a person and the first is not.
You're muted, Rob, and I see Commissioner Freeman has his hand up as well, but do you want to respond to that first, Bridget, about teasing out the clauses?
Chair Solomon, Commissioner McPherson, to be frank, I have not seen a difference of whether, a designation for person crime within a clause. But perhaps, I don't know if other commissioners have. I can certainly look for that, but I don't know at the moment if you can actually differentiate within a clause.
All right, Commissioner Freeman, then Vice Chair Bovet, Commissioner Norton, and Commissioner Auxier, in that order.
Well, thank you, Chair. I'm going to repeat kind of what was just said, but since the first Class B felony includes the widespread contact with humans, it almost has to be a person crime. I mean, I agree that, that is inconsistent with the first part of that, but the last part certainly has the, contact with humans portion. So I'm not sure you can split the baby on that. So if it's all going to be one thing, it would have to be a person crime.
Vice Chair Bovet. Thank you, Commissioner Freeman.
I was just going to say, I believe we actually do have in our rules where we've broken out not only CS levels, but person crimes and non-person crimes by clauses. Usually it's by sub-paragraph, but it could be done by clauses as well. But I just thought I'd throw that out. Yep. We could break out. I want to see the bill. I'm going to look it up here myself, 2772, to see if it's got things broken out. But we could easily break out the first one and say, hey, it's a person crime if somebody was placed at risk, if a human being was placed at risk, and not if otherwise. And we could do something like that, kind of like Bridget mentioned with regard to burglary, where we essentially treat occupied dwellings differently than non-occupied.
Right.
Commissioner or Chair, Vice Chair Bovet, I'm sorry, I put the bill in the chat, and to Commissioner McPherson, I was thinking you were saying clause as within like the same sentence in a sub part of the statute. But if you're talking about A versus B, yes, you can designate those differently. The rule would just say ORS blah, blah, blah is, this is a person felony part A, and then part B would not be ranked as a person felony or person crime.
So
thank you. I appreciate it.
And I just looked at the bill, and thank you, Bridget. That actually answered my question, because those are broken out. The two issues that Carl just mentioned are broken out in that bill as A and B. Maybe we could say for A, it's a person crime if somebody was actually placed at risk of injury, and then for B, it's just a person crime.
Great. Commissioner Norton.
Yes, as I'm learning, I just have a question. And I can see both sides, but where does intent fall on this? I think Bridget had made a point in terms of nobody intends to intimidate a bridge when they blow it up. I mean, the intent is always to cause widespread fear, correct? So I could see where that would be good to consider and not to consider, but in the past, or how do you weigh intent when it comes to these type of things? And thank you.
Commissioner Norton, So both of the parts that we're talking about, the sort of difference between A and B, have the mental state of intentionally. And perhaps I was trying to give sort of an illustration, but that was not what I would call legal analysis. Both of these parts do have the intentionally or intentional mental state. So the person accused would have to, the prosecutor would have to prove that they had, the intent to cause widespread sickness, contagion, those kind of things, as opposed to something lesser than that. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I don't.
Well,
it would be up to the prosecutor to prove the elements. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, for me, was the intent. So, okay, I might be admitting to a crime. When they first put fiber in our neighborhood, they buried it in my yard and made me upset. My intent wasn't to cause widespread fear, but under this thing, if I had ripped that cable out of the ground, that would be considered a crime of domestic terrorism, very limited, maybe not. But then I look alternatively at maybe driving under the influence, where it wasn't your intent to get, to kill somebody, which means manslaughter. And again, I'm not a legal expert. I'm just trying to understand if the intent is there, not the intent to do the damage, but the intent to cause the widespread fear. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Commissioner Norton. And I also would invite our practicing criminal experts, but I think that the situation you described, you would be lacking the intent to fulfill domestic terrorism by digging up your yard, because you were digging up your yard to get rid of a nuisance cable, not to terrorize others. But Commissioner McPherson, Auxier, or Bavette, or others, please, I know you all practice this all day long, so if that doesn't match your thinking.
Well, it's actually covered in the beginning of that subsection, and it states the intent right in the face of the bill. It basically says, with the intent to cause widespread sickness, contagion, serious physical injury, death, or the disruption of services provided by critical infrastructure. So that's the intent that has to be proven on either A or B. But that I think that just begs Carl's point, which is part of it could be, a desire to create fear, which to me is a person crime, versus a desire to interrupt the infrastructure for some other reason. And that's why I actually hear what Carl had to say, and I think he's right. I think we have to carve up A somehow into two subcategories. That's my take, but willing to defer to others.
Commissioner Auxier, did you have a comment you were going to make?
Commissioner Bovett got to it. So he addressed my point,
okay.
Just about bifurcating the statutes.
Yeah. Okay, so I also am in favor of splitting this out. Bridget, what do you need from us in terms of direction at this point, since we're not formally voting?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
It would be helpful if either Vice Chair Bavette or Commissioner McPherson would restate precisely where they'd like to bifurcate, and then if you all would sort of acknowledge consensus or not. So restatement and then whether there's consensus, please.
Great.
Want me to give it a shot? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Carl if he wanted to give it a shot, but I'm open to either one of you doing it.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Solomon. I'm happy to. I believe that based on the statute section 2, subparagraph B, that is a person crime because it requires widespread contact with human beings. In terms of subsection A, I think the issue there is intentionally destroying or substantially damaging critical infrastructure may or may not impact a person, particularly from physical injury, because the preceding sentence about causing sickness or contagion or serious physical injury or disruption of services. So I think for A, it would be a person crime if any of the first three occur, but not the last, disruption of services. And I think that's consistent with the idea of a base transceiver station or other wireless communication infrastructure. I mean, it shouldn't be a person crime if someone were to interfere with a cell phone tower. It's just not interfering. It's not requiring physical injury like the first three examples in section 2. Does that make sense, or did I ramble too much? I apologize if I rambled too much. I'm trying to focus on physical injury. To be a person crime, and I think the easiest answer is, robbery is a person crime because it's one person affecting another person, right? Damaging critical infrastructure where there's no person put at risk, it should not be a person crime. Maybe it's the better way for it to say it, in my opinion.
Commissioner Freeman.
So, understanding the argument, one could also argue the fact that critical infrastructure, other than regular infrastructure, is critical to persons. People using a cell phone to call 911 when somebody has a heart attack, using a road or a bridge to access emergency services, natural gas to make sure people's homes are heated, they don't freeze to death. Those are all critical for people. So I'd be a little careful saying that, a critical infrastructure under the definition of critical infrastructure is not related to or connected to a person.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not related to a person. I'm saying that for a person crime, it usually means direct harm to another person. And so someone tampering with a cell phone tower and the intent to tamper with a cell phone tower does not equate to direct harm to another person. Tampering with electric or gas, if we're in the summertime or the springtime where no one is at danger or risk of dying from freezing to death, is not necessarily putting someone in danger, a person in danger. I just think there's a difference. And given the broad category of critical infrastructure that's in the chat, I think it's really hard to categorize everything that would happen in subsection A as a person crime, because there's some that just aren't. They're not compared to other person crimes that we have in our state.
Yeah, I understand that argument, but blowing a dam up is going to hurt the dam, but what about all the people that live below it? I think that critical infrastructure list was made by the legislature and defined that way because those infrastructures listed in that definition are things that a person or people need or can need during critical times. And again, it's easy to say, well, yeah, blowing up a cell tower doesn't hurt anything, or disabling a cell tower. Trying to prove whether somebody needed to call, an ambulance because somebody's having a heart attack, it's hard to prove a non-event, but I think there's certainly a nexus to those pieces of infrastructure to the safety of persons. So I just want to be a little careful discounting the whole list as if it's, not a person, so it's not going to affect people, when in fact, because it's defined as critical, there was somebody at some point made the attempt to, segment or call these critical for a reason. And my guess is it's because it does affect people.
So I think for me, it would be helpful to really understand the definition of person crimes, because when I think of person crimes, I think of Measure 11 offenses where an individual has been harmed. So I don't know if there's a definition that's in statute around person crimes, but that might be helpful. And I see Vice Chair Bovet has a comment as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I really liked Carl's second phrasing, which I think dovetails with what you were saying, Mr. Chair, but doesn't go down the slippery slope that I think Commissioner Freeman was, correctly pointing out. Maybe we just keep it simple potentially and use Carl's second phrasing, which is on B, they're all person crimes. On A, it's only a person crime if someone was actually placed at risk of harm.
Uh-huh. Seems reasonable to me. Other comments? Is there consensus then around that definition? Or maybe framed another way, is there anyone opposed to using that splitting of hairs on that section? All right. Hearing none, I think you have your consensus, Bridget.
Yes, thank you very much. And Chair Solomon, to your question, one of the hard parts is there is no definition of what constitutes a person crime. We have a list of crimes that have been considered person crime. So it's kind of how does this all fit together rather than apply a definition. So, all right, well, thank you all. I'll move on to our next bill, House Bill 2005. It's undetectable firearms, colloquially called ghost guns. And what this bill did is it created a number of, there's quite a few pieces to it, but it made the manufacturer or sale of a ghost gun a B felony. It made the possession an A misdemeanor unless you have prior offenses, then it's a B felony. It made the possession of a firearm without a serial number a B violation or an A misdemeanor if priors. And then if you're importing an unfinished frame, that's a B violation. Again, it's elevated if there are priors. And then if you do that and you have priors for the manufacture, sale, or possession, then it's a B felony. What you're looking at here is whether to rank it or whether and where to rank it and whether there's a person crime designation. And I see Commissioner Auxier has his hand up. And I think he put the rules in the chat for you all.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I just thought I'd post the subsection 14 and subsection 15 have a complete list of the person felonies and person misdemeanors that are currently on the books in Oregon. So it kind of helps give a frame of reference. And I just thought I would offer some commentary that I thought this is a pretty straightforward one in the sense that, you know, firearm offenses where you shoot at someone, shoot and hit someone, or otherwise use the firearm to cause physical injury. Those are always person felonies, but other firearm possession felonies like unlawful possession of a short-barreled shotgun or felon in possession of a firearm, those are not person felonies. And so I feel like that's pretty well settled. And it also, yeah, that crime category 6 seems like a lot of these crimes that are like land at that crime seriousness score of 6. So that just seems really squarely in line with everything else.
I agree with Jeff.
You want to go back to that last slide, Bridget? Great. Is there anyone that feels differently about this being in crime category 6? All right, I'll take that as consensus.
And Chair Solomon, I'm also hearing that no person crime designation because there's no requirement that you actually had to use an undetectable firearm against someone else, right? Okay.
Yep. Okay,
thank you very much. So our next bill, Senate Bill 957, sex abuse involving a minor. What this did was it expanded the prior conviction types that increase your offense level for the crime of public indecency. So the types of things that would give you a prior. It also modified the crime of luring a minor to include new conduct And it also modified an affirmative defense, which is sort of less relevant to us today. Interestingly, both public indecency and luring a minor are presently not ranked. So your question, or things to consider, is whether you should rank either of these. And knowing that luring a minor is currently a C felony and public indecency is a Class A misdemeanor.
Commissioner Auxier? Is your hand up, or was that from, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. All right, what do people think about this?
I should also add, I'm sorry, I don't think this is clear. Oh, no, it is. They're currently not ranked either. So this might be one where, so I should have maybe made this clear too. Sometimes the decision is to leave as is. Just because it isn't currently ranked doesn't mean you are required to give it a new ranking if it is modified. So this might just be a time where you say the effect of the modifications don't prompt us to see that as necessary to ranking something that previously was not ranked.
How do people feel about that choice? Vice Chair Bovet?
I'm inclined to agree with that choice since we haven't ranked it. If I remember our last conversation, and this was years ago, about, I think, the public indecency crime, it was, we didn't want to rank it because it represented such a broad array of conduct. Mm-hmm. And some might be really low level and some might be extreme, and we didn't want to pick something in the middle that wasn't reflective. And so I'm harking back in my deep memories to that stuff, and my inclination is to not mess with this, but that's just my take. I'd be interested in what the other commissioners think.
Yeah, Commissioner McPherson.
I agree with Commissioner Bovet.
I also am inclined to agree. I think this is a crime that has a broad scope of behaviors, some of which many people may have engaged in their lifetime. All right, so is there consensus around not ranking this and leaving the designation as is? Okay.
Thank you, everyone. So our next bill is Senate Bill 974, Sex Abuse by Fraudulent Misrepresentation. It creates a new crime, sex abuse by fraudulent misrepresentation. If a person is a licensee and subjects another person to contact and by essentially falsely representing themselves as a legitimate medical provider or something kind of akin to that. It also, the legislature ranked this for you as a crime category 8 or crime rank 8. What you are here to consider is whether to give this to add this to the definition of person crime that Commissioner Auxier added to our chat. So should this be listed in section 14 or part 14 of those definitions?
So maybe one of the lawyers in the room can help me. If a person, and I'm thinking of recent case in DOC where someone is a medical professional or is, uses their license to misrepresent themselves and sexually assaults a person, they are charged with both the offense of sexual assault and they could be charged with this crime too, or would this crime encompass the sexual assault that occurred?
It seems to me, Chair Solomon, that you could, in that fact pattern, you could charge both crimes. I think this seems squarely to me to be a person felony. There are a lot of analogous crimes that are person felonies, like sex abuse in the second degree, which is sexual, or sex abuse 2 is a person felony, and that's sexual penetration without consent is a person felony. And so it seems like it would kind of fall within those lines.
And so we're just being asked whether or not to designate this as a person crime. Is that correct?
Chair Solomon, yes. And what that would do is add it to the list of crimes designated as a person crime under our sentencing grid rules.
That makes sense to me. Is there anyone who might see that differently? Hearing no opposition, I'll take that as an affirmation that we have consensus on moving this forward as a person crime.
Thank you very much. Those are the bills that seem to prompt some sort of more likely to require a response. And then there are others that are sort of maybe less obvious. So given that we still have time, I think I'll go to those next unless anyone feels differently. Yep. Okay. So Senate Bill 326, it's delivery of marijuana for essentially possession that exceeds the allowable amount by quite a bit. And it modified quite a few things as well. The legislature gave you 2 crime categories. 6, if it's just a general, you're possessing an amount that's 32 times what's allowed, or if you have more than 100 plants. And then there's other sort of factors that go as well. I think the question for you is, the legislature assigned a crime category 8 if any of this conduct is related to labor trafficking. So should this be, should that conduct be added to our person felony list as well? One thing to consider is that trafficking in persons is already a person felony. So this would be a much narrower set of opportunities or circumstances where that would apply. So it might be one of those, maybe not, because it's just less likely to play out that way. But that is what you're here to discuss, is whether that is required.
Commissioner Bovet.
As you might guess, I have a pretty strong opinion about this one since I crafted this bill. I believe that all the CCH should be person crimes. Even though I crafted this provision, Department of Justice helped me craft the definition and the scope of what the labor trafficking looks like, so it would mirror what they wrote in their bill. I think it would be highly inconsistent if we didn't treat all labor trafficking the same. It's a person crime, in my opinion.
Thank you. Commissioner Freeman.
I was simply going to agree with what Rob just said. What they're doing to these people is inhumane and as much of a person crime as I've ever witnessed. It's horrible.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. Unless I hear any opposition, I'll take that as consensus that we'll move this forward as a person felony crime category 8.
Thank you. All right, our next bill is Senate Bill 340, organized retail theft. This does a number of things as well. It adds retail theft to the repeat property offense statute. I think in relevant part, like I said, it does a lot of things, but it amends Theft 1 to include situations where during the course of an organized retail theft, an individual recklessly engages in conduct which creates a substantial risk of serious physical injury. So Theft 1 is currently a property crime under our rules. And the consideration here is whether that conduct, that sort of particular conduct under Theft 1, should be designated a person crime because the sort of reckless engagement that creates the substantial risk of harm to someone. And again, this is, one of those, carving or sort of setting aside a more narrow set of circumstances than the broader sort of statute itself. So that's why it's maybe less obvious than the ones we went through in the first section.
Go ahead, Commissioner McPherson.
Thank you, Chair Solomon. I would say no, it should remain a property crime. It's not a situation where there is an actual injury to another individual as compared to creating a risk of an injury. Mm-hmm. And as Commissioner Auxier put in the chat, when you look up the person crimes, I mean, there's quite a few, so I'm reading them quickly, but almost every single one, and having dealt with this before, would deal with an actual injury. So I don't think the threat of an injury should take this from property to person. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Freeman.
I agree. And I also know if, during the crime as it's being committed, if somebody is hurt, that can be charged as a separate crime as a person crime. So correct. It seems to me like the theft one is the appropriate without the person crime.
All right. Is there another hand up? I can't tell whose it is. Oh, no, I think that was Commissioner Freeman. Okay. All right. Unless there's any opposition, sounds like we have consensus there as well.
Great. Thank you all. Our next bill, Senate Bill 787. This amends Assault 3 to include transit operators. Assault 3 lists some sort of particular classes of folks doing things in their job roles that make them particularly vulnerable to this kind of conduct. So the question here is, so it's already, I'm sorry, it also amended aggravated harassment, which is a sort of set of ways of propelling bodily fluids at someone. That's what aggravated harassment generally covers. So Assault 3 is ranked currently at a crime category 6, and it's an 8 if it results from a Dewey. Aggravated harassment is currently not ranked. So your considerations, or to my mind, what your considerations, does anything here prompt you to re-rank Assault 3? The second being, is there a reason to rank aggravated assault when it's previously unranked? I don't see much that changes the sort of, point of the statute, but that is not for me to decide. So.
Well, on the surface, I just think if it isn't currently ranked in other Assault 3 cases, I don't know why we would do that now. Oh, I think you're muted, Vice Chair Bovet.
Well, I think Assault 3 it's a 6, yeah. And then it's 8 when it's resulting from a Dewey. So aggravated harassment, and that's did they create that as a C felony? Is that what they did?
You're muted, Bridget.
I believe so, but let me double check that. I don't want to be wrong.
And I'm curious why this expansion. Were you not able to charge assaults of transit workers with Assault 3 in the past? Oh, yeah, Rep. Lewis just said, did this bill pass? He didn't think so.
Yeah. Looks like it did. And it looks like the aggravated harassment statute already covers a broad variety of folks, police officers, corrections officials, other people that would be subjected to this type of conduct. And it's already a C felony. So my take is we ought to rank it exactly where all those other subparagraphs are ranked. I don't know what those are, but that's, I guess that would, where is aggravated harassment? Is it completely unranked right now? Because it's this.
You're muted, Bridget.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair Babette, it is unranked presently, aggravated harassment.
Interesting. So it looks like it was, yeah, it's 166,070, and it's got public safety officers, other staff members. I guess I wish I had a clue about why we decided to unrank the previous one, but maybe there was a reason for. Oh, it looks like Ken might have.
Ken's got his hand up. Let's see what he has to say.
Well, I don't have any help for you there, but it does look like Rep. Lewis is correct. When I'm looking at OLIS right now, 787 does not show as being passed. I think it may have been erroneously added to our list.
Oh, well.
With this long list. So thank you,
Okay.
Rep. Lewis.
Let's move on to the next one then.
Well, that's fun. Apologize for that. Now we are all a little more familiar with Assault 3. Senate Bill 615, speed racing. Let's see here. Let me get my screen right. So the question here is, did any of the modifications to speed ranking prompt a rank? It's not presently ranked. It's not designated as a person crime. Really what it did was it reduced organizing a speed racing event to from a C felony to an A misdemeanor unless you have a prior conviction within 5 years. So this is why it's in the gray area. There doesn't seem to be much here that would prompt a change, but again, that's for you all to weigh yourselves as experts. And it would maybe be helpful to know that the only driving crimes that are person crimes are hit and run causing physical injury and vehicular assault.
I agree with Bridget. I think it should be left as is.
Any other comments? Right. Looks like we'll support moving this forward as is.
All right, so now we're getting to the sort of the bottom tier of probably, probably no action needs to be taken. Again, not for the CJC staff to decide. Senate Bill 1060, we started here. This adds a way, essentially it kind of spells out what evidence can be used to prove or to substantiate physical injury. So I don't see anything to do here, but please, I've been wrong before, so.
Any commissioners see this differently?
No, I agree with Bridget.
Getting some nods. Okay, I think we have consensus to leave this one alone.
Sorry, it's quite the long PowerPoint, so the slides, got to get them. So the next bill on our list is House Bill 2316, any intoxicating substances. The question here is whether the rank for DUIs should change based on adding any impairing drug to the list of things that can, prompt a DUI conviction, and whether the person crime designation should change. It is a person felony if you have 3 prior convictions. It's an A misdemeanor otherwise. For what it's worth, I didn't see much in here other than adding an additional substance to the list of ways to commit a DUI, being under the influence of that. But again, up to you all. So please let me know what you think.
Thoughts?
I think just adding one more to the list, leave everything else the same.
Yep.
Thank you.
I agree. Sounds like we're getting some other nods.
Shoot.
All right.
Okay. Next, we have 3309 as prohibitions on delivery of alcohol. Much of this this bill really was about OLCC, but it did create a few violations. There's no felony conduct contemplated in these statutory modifications, and there's also no person conduct, as we've been sort of talking about. Are you trying to harm someone else? Are you trying to do something to someone else? It's if you're essentially delivering alcohol improperly. I'd be happy to go into it in more detail, but right now the most serious crime available is a Class A misdemeanor. I'm sorry, yes, Class A misdemeanor. And so other than that, I don't see much to do on the person designation front or ranking it. But again, up to you all.
Hearing no comments, I will take that as a consensus to move forward on this as is.
Apologies for the slides jumping around. This is our last bill. It's House Bill 2645. It increased penalties for fentanyl possession. It creates a Class A misdemeanor, and it adds possession of fentanyl as a drug misdemeanor. We all, in our sentencing grid rules, we also have designated drug crimes like we do person crimes. So it adds this to the list. The legislature told us that we will be doing that. So really, I don't even have really a question for you. I don't see anything here that we need to add. And there doesn't seem to be an obvious person crime designation justification. But again, this is up for you all to discuss if there's differences of opinion. Maybe one thing that's helpful to know, one of the things this bill really did was, because fentanyl is hard, you can have a pill, you can have sort of various quantities. It did specify quantities, and it added units of measurement to be sort of considered detectable fentanyl for calculating your crime seriousness in the future.
Any comments on this one? All right. I think that wraps us up.
Well, thank you all for bearing with me. Very long slide presentation, but appreciate this, and we'll get your feedback put into draft rules. Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. Before we wrap up, I think that was the last thing on the agenda. Ken, are you still with us?
I'm here.
Just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the recent passing of former Chair Jerome Brooks. While I didn't have the pleasure of serving with him on the commission, our times his superseded mine. It is a great loss to our community, and I think there's universal appreciation for the work he did on this commission. And just wanted to give Director Sanchagrin a moment to share anything about Mr. Brooks and his work with the CJC.
Thank you, Chair. Sure, I have a few words. Mr. Brooks was with us for a relatively short period of time here at the commission. He joined us in November of 2021, but he was able to, kind of based on the timing of his joining us, really shepherd us through that 21-25 granting period. He came in at the tail end of our JRI work, but worked pretty closely with staff and with me on the illegal marijuana approvals, as we were able to get $32 million out the door during the last biennium. But I think that knowing Jerome the way that I did, though not as well as many, I think that his probably thing he would have been most proud of during his time at the commission was helping us to fund the Gun Violence Review Commission at OHSU. And so, I think that would be kind of the feather in his cap. And I will say that we're also planning, that group, by the way, has been, doing work and reviewing cases, and we're planning to have them this spring come and present. And so that might be a good way to kind of honor his memory. So yes, I hope that you all join me in mourning his loss. There was a memorial held for him last week. It was shocking when I saw how young he was, especially thinking that I'm young and he's younger than me. But yes, his work was very much appreciated in his time that he had with us.
Thank you, Ken. All right. We have anything else for good of the order from staff?
I would just say that we do have a lot of things that will be coming at the beginning of next year, especially in January, given that we have some protests. We will also have our Jackson County, perhaps some of those discussions. And then with some of the marijuana rulemaking, we're going to have a quick get together as staff, but don't be surprised if you hear from Carol, possibly seeing if we could make the meeting a little longer than 2 hours. So that's just one heads up, given some things that we've just got to clear off our plates.
Great. We will look forward to hearing more information about what's on tap for January.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well,
hopefully everybody has a great holiday first, though.
Yes, indeed. You took the words right out of my mouth. I hope everybody is able to take some time off, enjoy this holiday season, and look forward to seeing you all in the new year. And thank you for Lewis for joining us, and Commissioner Norton for being a part of the commission. And we will see you all in January.
Thank you all.
County. So